Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network. For the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews, press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Hello, movie goers. Today we are dissecting another fun film on Anatomy of a Movie on the Popcorn Talk Network. Today we're doing Burnt, the 2015 nice cook, I don't know how you call it, home cooked meal? Not home cooked, especially not cooked meal.
There you go.
There you
Something
go.
like that.
Gourmet meals, yes. We're definitely going to dissect all of this. We have a fun panel today. I'm your host, Marisa Serafini. Joining me,
I'm Stephanie Wenger. You can find me on Twitter at Stephanie Wenger.
And I'm Sara Stretton. Glad to be back. And Twitter is at Sara_Stretton. So you can find me there and other places on the interwebs.
There you go.
And you guys can find me, Sean Overman, at Sean Austin O on Twitter and Instagram.
Excellent. Burnt, starring Sienna Miller and Bradley Cooper. What were your quick overall thoughts? We'll go down the line. Stephanie.
I enjoyed the movie. We'll get into what some of the critics thought of it in a little bit, I'm sure, but I overall really enjoyed it. There were definitely flaws in it, but I enjoy kind of food movies, I think, so I overall thought it was great, and I think the acting is phenomenal in it.
Yeah, I think you go into this movie, and so much of the marketing, what you hear about it, has really been pointed at Bradley Cooper. Whether or not how this is done in the box office relates to him, whatnot. But I don't really, if I'm going to categorize this film into what makes me think of it, I'm not thinking this is a Bradley Cooper movie. I think of it as a cooking movie. And as a cooking movie, in that genre, I had a lot of fun. I liked this movie. I thought that people have been a little too harsh on it. If I'm going to compare it to my favorite cooking movies, there are ones I like better that I'm probably going to watch. But seeing this in theater, I enjoyed myself. After. I wasn't disappointed about sitting there for however long. I don't feel like my money was wasted. It was a nice time. Is it a movie that I need to revisit over and over again? Probably not. And we'll get into why.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I feel like you guys have some high praise about it. You a little bit less, Sarah, but I feel like with me, it wasn't as enjoyable of a film as I thought it was going to be. I do think that Rotten Tomatoes, they're just blasting this film, which is undeserved. I feel like looking at a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, the interviews with the director, with the chef who helped to supervise them.
Yes.
I have more of an appreciation for the film after seeing that stuff, but I want to say that the movie was it left kind of a bad taste in my mouth.
Ooh. For a movie about restaurants having the best taste in your mouth. Interesting.
And a Bradley Cooper film, because I expect him to do so much better, but I feel like he had to be more subdued in this film in some ways. He can be crazier in a lot of other movies that I've seen, but here we have him I think it's part of him, and we can talk about this later when we get to him as a character and as the actor, but I feel like because he's playing like a recovering addict, he had to be more subdued in some areas, and then you could see those explosions here and there. I don't know. That's just my take on it.
Overall,
so you are pointing your finger at Bradley Cooper.
Overall, I walked out of this movie not angry. I mean, I liked the visual, the editing, the sound, the technicality of the technical aspects of this whole film was amazing, and I think that was really, really well done. I think the writing and the story, which we'll definitely get into, I think that was, for me as a moviegoer, that was the hardest part for me to really get attached to and really like throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, the predictability of the script left me, I could have predicted every turn that happened in that movie for sure, and that was frustrating to me. I there were things where I was like, oh, it would be interesting if they took a left turn here and they just continued on a straight path throughout the entire film.
Right.
You're like, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
I felt like this movie was the perfect blend of 100-Foot Journey, which we have done the dissection on that, and Chef. That was Jon Favreau's cooking film.
You say perfect. I wanted to, what you mean by perfect, because I saw both of those films. I enjoyed both of those films. I think that, yes, it's the same category, but if I'm going to put those in an order, I'm going to put the other two above Burnt.
Okay, I can completely agree. I say perfect when maybe perfect's not the best word. I see it more as I can see the visual and sound, the cinematography from 100-Foot Journey, and apply that to this film with the way they present food and the way the colors and the visual aspect of it.
It was
and
very art-like.
It was.
Every plate you looked at was just amazing and beautiful, and I thought that was such a contrast to what was going on in the plot. Like you said, it was like a predictable plot.
Yeah, and the food is an art form in and of itself. And then I see the fun, troubled man, which we got in Chef, who wanted to do what he wanted. He had a mission in life. And we kind of got that aspect in a different way. But we had that male protagonist who went through a hardship and now is trying to regain himself. So I kind of saw that type of similarity in his storytelling compared to this film.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I kept thinking about, and I stayed through the credits, and I couldn't find online who the food stylist was. And we know an actual real-life celebrity chef made a lot of the food, but
Marcus Waring was the food consultant on this film.
Marcus Waring.
He's actually worked under Gordon Ramsay for many years. He himself is a two Michelin star chef.
Absolutely. But what I found so interesting was that I kept looking for the food stylist, like the person who plated all that food, and it was incredible. It was so pretty, every shot, and it made me so hungry by the end of the movie.
This is where I'm actually going to differ.
Yeah.
I loved the food for 75% of the movie. Thought it was beautiful. Thought their market shots were great. The cinematography they used to lighten it really brought life to the food. What I didn't like about the food design was that they stopped bringing in original plates by the end of the film.
Oh, interesting.
It seemed I was recognizing the food, specifically the meat dish with the blue little flowers. Yeah. I was recognizing it. I could tell, and I know that that's kind of asking for a suspension of belief because they are talking about a restaurant that has signature menu items. Mm-hmm. So I felt like, it's their menu. They have to just keep doing their menu. But for me, the food, while it still at the end looked delicious, I knew what was coming. I knew what it was going to look like. It looked like the same plated food. It was the same color scheme as what they kept serving in his restaurant. And I was just like, well, I'm not interested in that anymore. Like, why aren't you adding more different textures instead of using this same menu throughout from the halfway point on? And that bothered me.
Interesting. Because I see that point because also in Chef and 100-Foot Journey, not to keep comparing this film to those, but that's what comes up in my mind. Both of those films was always, those characters were bored with their menus that they were constantly cooking. They wanted to punch things up and change the recipes after years of tradition. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what made those films really good to watch throughout. And we saw the progression of food. And this one, we saw it was already set on such a high standard, a high platform for these foods. Like, how could you already top yourself?
Yeah, it would have been interesting to have a little bit more of the competition between him and Matthew Rhys's character.
Rhys.
Yeah,
Rhys.
Rhys
playing Rhys.
Rhys playing Rhys. And see a little bit more of like how their food differed. I felt like they were very similar restaurants, and maybe that's what it takes to be Michelin star, but it felt like, it would be more interesting if they were kind of two different vibes going on.
I agree.
I think that was a thing that we saw throughout this whole film, is that we got to see a lot of these characters, right? There's a lot of stars in this movie, but they were all just like lightly touched upon so that we get like a little bit of a feel for how Adam Jones's life is, but then we don't really get to explore each of the characters much more. The only two people that they really focused on were Adam Jones and Helene, and that was pretty much it, And then Adam Jones, of course, we get to see like his struggle, but then we don't get any kind of like he starts off the movie like narrating, and then he doesn't really it drops off, which is, that's fine, but then he doesn't do much more beyond that until him and Helene in the food market, in the I forgot the name of the place, but they're in that market, and then that's where he reveals pretty much everything that's been troubling his character.
Yeah.
His very long monologue.
Yes.
Well, he is definitely trouble. Do you think that's a testament to the writing, just the narrative of the storytelling for each of these characters? Because, yes, we have a star-studded cast, and I feel like because of such a strong lineup with all these actors and actresses, I felt like this movie should have generated more views in that way, just having an amazing cast. But do you think that was a testament to the writing, that it wasn't fully fleshed out?
It could have been. I haven't seen 100-Foot Journey. I don't know if did Stephen Knight write that as well.
Stephen Knight did write
but
that.
He did. He also
for the screenplay. But that film was also based off of a book, too.
Okay. And I know that Stephen Knight did do that film Locke. Am I correct, with Tom Hardy in it? So I think he did. But anyway, I want to say like it didn't need to have so many. I don't know. If we were going to focus on Adam Jones's character, which we did a lot of the film, it's kind of like he was sharing the plate with food. It was just him and food, and that was it. And it was more like we get to. Did you guys ever see Hero Dreams of Sushi, that Netflix documentary?
No, but it sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's great, and that makes sushi look beautiful. Like the sushi is the star, right? But that guy in Japan, he has a 3-star Michelin restaurant, and and you have to book a year in advance to go eat there. And
just to eat sushi.
Yeah, and then when you're there, I think there's only 10 seats in the whole restaurant, and it's a 20-course meal, single piece of sushi, $100, $120. No, I think it's $200. It's $200 a person to eat there. It's insane, right? So
That is insane.
I feel like this was taking from like that film and a lot of other food things. Like Gordon Ramsay was a good like blend with maybe Anthony Bourdain, and that's kind of what made up Adam Jones's character. And I just feel like we could have explored more about his troubled past. We see him in the newspaper, and he's got in the film, and he's got like his hair up in like a half samurai style, which is totally different. Just like a mere 3 years ago, that picture was taken in the timeline of the movie, and it's like what. I would have liked to see some flashbacks of him being crazier. We only got to see him be crazy and break down for that one moment near the end of the film where he like lost his sobriety.
Yeah. I
agree.
I think it's interesting how you say we needed the breakdown. I don't think we needed to, because it's already been throughout the film. We slowly kept getting a little bit more of his background. Like, we started the film with... My problem is the way that they explained it. First off, it's like, we know he's trying to redeem himself. He had a troubled past. He got down on himself and took a lot of drugs and whatnot. So he pretty much messed up his career. That I understood. And the way that it was like so... piece here and piece there, and then we eventually had to put it together, kind of bothered me in that just storytelling in that way. But it was enough for me to not want flashbacks to show something that we already knew.
See, I felt like with his character, I either wanted it to be a film where he was, and he nearly was in every scene, I think, Adam Jones was definitely the focal point, but you have this amazing, and Bradley Cooper even said it when he was promoting the film, international cast, and it frustrated me that we kind of had all these people but really knew nothing about most of them. And that was something that I wanted. Like, if you're going to have all these people, I want more about them.
Even Uma Thurman, she was only in there for 2 scenes, probably less than 5 minutes total time, and she was just like there and spoke like 10 lines, and that's it.
My problem isn't that I understand that sometimes you can have cameos or smaller parts, and I don't need to know everyone's full story. But my exchange, if you're not going to give me the full story, then their part really needs to affect the plot, script, or my main character.
That's a great point.
And that, that's the exchange. Either tell me more about this person so I'm invested in them, or make whatever presence they have affect your main character or driving thing. And for me, it's you take Uma Thurman, for instance, and not only do we get to know more about Uma Thurman, because they definitely have a history, and she was really fun for the one scene she was in, but her reaction was to get him. It was just a brief second, and there was no full circle. It was within 2 scenes that she was in the restaurant and getting him a job. Okay, so we have character who got him job, but it doesn't come back. It doesn't come back in the end. She doesn't help build his character. She literally simply came in, had one fun scene, and then very quickly it was a small payoff. It wasn't a building thing in any way.
Yeah, it made me wonder what was their history. Why does she do this for him without question? It was just like instantaneously, of course I'm going to go in there and like put her own reputation on the line in some ways and get him the job back.
Yes.
The job.
It made things, there were many characters who in a way made things very easy for Bradley Cooper's character based on history we didn't know. Yeah. Uma Thurman's a big one. His ex-girlfriend who ends up paying off his debt, she does that very easily. That's should be a huge factor in a script.
And I felt like that was too easy to wrap up that particular storyline.
Yeah, there was a lot of bits of that. I felt like if you took the script for this and outlined it, you had the potential for a ton of characters with a ton of... They were searching for, like, layered people. Like, layered, like, have either slept with him, have a history with him, he betrayed them, they were in love with him. They were trying to create layers all around, but then it was only an outline. It was never fleshed out through each section.
Right, I agree.
I agree with that. What do we think of the directing? We know that John Wells, who's mostly known for television, shows such as ER, Shameless, and the upcoming Animal Kingdom film. What do we think of his direction? Because all the cast interviews always said that John Wells always had a vision. He always knew what he wanted, but he allowed the cast members to have some freedom with their characters and a lot of movement throughout the film while they're cooking and whatnot. Like when they were taking one shot of a thing, like of a particular movement, that they would do it over and over again, so the actor could just get it right in different ways.
I thought that the authenticity that he presented in the movement of a kitchen was really nice. How he directed their kitchen environment. I also did see a difference between Adams and Rhys's kitchens and how their chefs cooked and whatnot. I thought that the movement of those actors was handled really well. I felt the speed in the kitchen. I thought his depiction of like focusing in on the fire, focusing in on the pans, focusing in on different equipment was done fairly well. My biggest problem was that there was no change up in food. If that's his fault or who knows, but whoever's fault that is, that's my biggest problem now. But I that was my favorite thing that he did, was creating that I felt the kitchen environment felt very true to me.
Yes, the movement.
Was it his responsibility to seek out a chef consultant?
He's the one that saw Marcus wearing.
And I think he did a great job.
I think that was an excellent choice.
Yeah, because the food... So I want to differ a little bit than you, Sarah, and I want to say, like, the food did look amazing. I thought it looked beautiful in every scene. Yes, it did have kind of like a common thread that was
repetitive.
Going. Yeah, a little bit repetitive, but at the same time, it's like, hey, it's that particular chef. It's like, he's an artist, right? So he's gonna craft things a certain way, and that's gonna show his style. I really enjoyed how I saw a little bit of an interview with Marcus Waring, and he explained that part, what you were talking about regarding shooting the scenes over and over again and all day in the kitchen and them doing the same repetitive movements, because that does happen in a kitchen. The chefs are doing things the same. They're over the pans the same way. They're cutting up things the same way because they're preparing it for many different patrons in the restaurant.
They're making the same dish over and over again too.
And doing that, it simulated a real kitchen, and we got to capture that on film, and props to John Wells for facilitating all that.
Yeah, Stephanie, how about you?
I also felt like he allowed the actors to kind of... There were moments with Bradley Cooper and Sienna Miller where I felt like they were acting without vanity, and I think that that's a really hard thing to accomplish on a movie like this. You often see actors who are like, you can't forget that they're Bradley Cooper throughout the entire film. And I think it, in part, is Bradley Cooper's responsibility, and then in part, it's the director. And on this, especially, there's a scene with a plastic bag over his head, and going to that place, having, I assume, the director very involved in that, made for some really nice real moments throughout the film.
Yeah, I liked the characters overall and the direction of where he wanted the characters. Granted, some maybe it does test to the writing that not a lot of them were completely fleshed out, but the main ones, in a way, were. We saw a lot of time with Helene and Adam, and we saw a lot of time with Rhys, who we're building up as maybe he's the antagonist, but he really isn't. And I liked how in the end of the film he became the friend that he needed, that Adam needed. So I liked how the key characters had key moments.
What do you feel the antagonist was?
It was.
I think, himself.
Yeah, there was no. We had these people set up, some of them to look like antagonists. If there was anybody who was maybe kind of an antagonist, it would be Michel, because he poisoned. He spiced up the food really badly.
And he kept the cayenne pepper in his hand the whole time.
I know, that was
Just
funny.
a show.
Yeah, it was like, I put it in there.
That
It
was
me.
a sucker punch.
Caught me red-handed. So,
Literally.
if anything, he was somewhat of an antagonist, but it was like we had a lot of false antagonists because it was really Adam Jones against himself and him not trusting people. And then when he did trust people, like with Michelle, they failed him. So that's pretty much who it was.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting into the characters, and we were saying we'll talk a lot about Bradley now. His character Adam Jones. And Stephen Knight, the screenwriter, even said he had difficulty, but he enjoyed writing a anti-hero, a protagonist that is the antagonist as well, and an unlikely protagonist. What do you guys think of Adam? The fact that he was so unlikable at the beginning.
I think that I'm glad he had the chance to experiment with it. To me, it's not an unfamiliar character. It's not like. It could be an unfamiliar character for a writer, but it's not an unfamiliar character to see as an audience. For Bradley Cooper's portrayal of it, I thought that he did a very solid job for most of it. He lost me actually on the monologue bit a little bit. I felt like the pace changed, the tone changed, and I got pulled out and was like, oh, it's a monologue time. Waiting.
It's exposition.
But I think that the fact that he speaks French really aided him in this and how natural that was to the script. He's been famous for doing that in interviews. I don't know the history. I believe one of his parents was French or something. But
I think he studied abroad.
Yeah, but he's come out before as doing a lot of media and marketing over there. But so it wasn't an unheard of character for me. It wasn't even an unheard of character for Bradley Cooper, in my opinion.
Well, he did Kitchen Confidential on Fox, and I think it was a very short-lived show, but again, set in that kitchen, high-stakes environment. So it definitely was interesting, and I read an interview with him today and talking about that he did Kitchen Confidential, and then he also has been pretty open, I think, in the press about his own sobriety issues as well. So there were a lot of elements that kind of played into things that he's done in the past.
Yeah, and Bradley Cooper himself, when he was growing up, and his earlier jobs that he used to work in restaurants. Like, he used to be a prep cook, and then he worked in a different seafood type of restaurant as well.
I feel like he's good at playing a really arrogant prick, which is really nice, and he does that in a lot of his roles. But here it was different. It was more subdued and more controlled. I kind of mentioned this earlier, more controlled. But then when we get to points where he gets pissed, and we get to see that. For him, being a chef and having his kitchen and getting that 3 stars, it's like the ultimate game for him. And it's, in a way, it's really like that's his only remaining addiction. That's his drug now that he's using, which I thought that they played that card really well.
Right. And we keep talking about the Michelin star ratings, 3 stars. I highly suggest, if you're listening to us, also listen to our 100-foot journey dissection, where we also talk about Michelin stars. But an overview for you all listening now who don't know, the Michelin star rating is, yes, from the same company that doles out the tires, but back in the 1900s, the company launched a first guidebook to encourage road tripping in France, and that's where the star ratings came from. And the whole staff of the Michelin stars, they're known to be anonymous. No one knows who they are. And then that's the whole purpose, is to be a chameleon.
It's a secret society.
Yeah, to be a chameleon. So there's a 1, 2, 3 star rating, and the first star is a good place to stop on your journey, indicating a very good restaurant in its category, offering cuisine prepared to a consistently high standard. 2-star rating is a restaurant worth a detour, indicating excellent cuisine and skillfully and carefully crafted dishes of outstanding quality. And then 3, which we know Adam Jones is pining for, is a restaurant worth a special journey, indicating exceptional cuisine where diners eat extremely well, often superbly. Distinctly dishes are precisely executed using superlative ingredients. So that is the rating star system that we are talking about.
And they're not everywhere. Like, Michelin does not rank every city. For a long time, I believe Los Angeles wasn't ranked, although I think
it is now.
It does, but that's recent. But it's very selective on not only getting a star, but if you're even in a location to be even looked at for a star, which to me is kind of funny.
Yeah. So I did like how they had this one big major goal that his character was striving for. So that was the whole upward process for his character, which I did like, and in the end he does finally get it. But throughout that process we see his friend Michelle. They had history in Paris, and now they're working in London. Did you see this twist from Michelle
I didn't.
to surprise Adam?
That was funny because it was a really big twist, and I guess that's what pushed Adam over the edge to go back, and we didn't see what he did, but I'm sure he was just drinking. Otherwise, he would have failed those blood tests with the doctor. But I didn't see that, but now in hindsight, looking back at the movie, why would Michelle seek him out? Because we saw Adam Jones looking around for people to pretty much recruit to get a kitchen using his connections, but then Michelle comes out of nowhere, right? And at first we think it's just because he wants revenge on him for ruining his kitchen, right? Back in Paris 3 years ago, right? The magic number 3 years ago. And then he's working with him, and he's like his lieutenant. He's his right-hand man.
Sous chef.
Yeah, he's a sous chef. He does everything next. After, if he leaves somewhere, he's like, Michelle, take over for me. But I didn't see it coming, honestly.
See, I thought it was such an interesting moment because he was like, oh yeah, we're friends. And I was like, well, that's very quick to forgive someone. And then I was like, okay, now they're in the kitchen. And I kind of forgot about it briefly. And then as soon as he was like, oh, I tasted it already, it's good, I was like, oh nope, he's doing something something that's not good. Yeah.
I did not catch it. I was kind of in between where I was like, that's a little strange. Oh well. I was more concerned. I was like, he was, for me, one of the only chefs they really didn't focus on his cooking or how what he effectively was preparing. I knew that because they told me he was second in line, I knew it. But as opposed to Helene, who we really got to see making her sauce, or the guy who did the meat, who would always flip the meat, or the young chef who was you was like, oh, is this the next big guy? You watched him cook. Those are all characters that I actively saw being effective in the kitchen. And I was like, why do they have him? That was my question. I was like, if you're not showing me what he's doing, and I was like, why? What? There's something there that I'm not getting.
I feel like that was they wanted that to be a huge twist. They were like, oh, he's his friend, and then now he's turned against him. But for me, it was kind of, especially because it ended up, can we talk about not being a Michelin star reviewer? Yeah. It was such a, okay, it didn't really do what I felt like it needed.
See, in retrospect, I thought just the first encounter with Michelle in the street, being chasing Adam, and that whole conversation is I've had time to forgive you and think about it. I was like, no, you didn't. And I thought that resolve at the beginning was too easy. It was when it comes to cooking and Michelin, that's something you don't forget. And I don't think you forgive easily either, unless he did. But I personally thought that was way too easy for Michelle to already forgive Adam for such a big thing that happened between them. So I kind of saw it coming.
It was a good way to write in a mole. Somebody to be in the kitchen to sabotage.
I wanted them to take it a step further and have the surrounding staff besides Adam react to Michelle. Like, because it didn't just affect Adam. Like, it was targeted to mostly affect him. But also, he was supposedly friends with everyone else involved who hadn't done him wrong and didn't deserve or whatever, any type of revenge. And because he had such a relationship with so many of them for years, besides Helene, like, I didn't understand why none of them reacted stronger.
Well, it was interesting, even the gentleman who I guess was in prison and then he came to the kitchen, you would think he was like there 3 years ago for all that. You would get a reaction from him at the very least. And you just kind of were like, everyone was like, oh, I'm upset, but moving on, and he goes and loses it. And I thought it was such an easy way out of that scenario to be like, oh, it wasn't actually a Michelin star reviewer, don't worry about it. And I was kind of like, well, it would be more interesting if it actually was in a lot of ways.
I can see that also. I see it as just that moment where he realizes when he did wrong against all of his friends 3 years ago, he now had that personal feeling. Like, he knows what it felt like. And I liked how they applied it to him. I think maybe that was his karma. And what goes around comes around. And I liked how it got to his character to realize that was the impact what he did to all of his friends and all of his coworkers 3 years ago. So he needed that empathy to go through that. And that's what I liked about this whole twist.
And he almost killed himself regarding that whole thing that happened. He threw his book off the bridge. He looked like he was going to throw himself off the bridge.
Was that his countdown of days?
That was his
countdown of shucking of the
shucking oysters. That's right, because he counted 1 million of them. It took him 3 years to do that.
Yeah, and little side bit of that, Bradley Cooper actually used to shuck oysters when he was a prep cook, and when they were filming it, they did about 60. That's actually him shucking oysters.
Wow.
So, and that was actually the first day of filming. And Bradley told the director, John Wells, he's like, you know what, if this goes wrong, because, you know, he's dealing with a very sharp blade, and if he slices his hand, they're going to have to put production on hold for a few weeks until he heals. And that was the very first day of production.
Yeah, and it's oysters and those things, you know, they've been known to cause food poisoning, like the amount of bacteria that's in them, you know, and viruses. He could have got that into his blood. That would have been bad, too.
Yeah, I like that.
So watch yourself.
I was going to say, I was like,
Sure.
that is a traumatizing turn.
Yeah. I like that beginning of the film, though, because it started his character on a humbling level. Like, he counted, once he got to that point, and maybe it's that rehab in him that, you know, you count to so many days until, like, the next goal. And I felt that was his, in a chef's perspective, 100 shucking oysters and then moving on. So I like that.
I did love it. Also showed his attitude immediately when he was done with the oysters. He literally just like walked out. He's like, I've done it. I'm good. And like leaves in the middle of his shift. And I was like, oh, we know who this guy is from the very first scene.
Yeah. And I liked how it kind of set his character, he's goal driven. Like, he wants a certain thing, he achieves it, no matter how long or how hard it takes. And 1 million is hard. I mean, I've never shucked an oyster, but dang, I give his character props. So it definitely established that fact that he's goal driven, and he wants his Michelin star.
And he's OCD to an extent, right? Isn't that what some of the other characters?
They called
Yeah.
him crazy.
Yeah, they called him crazy.
Yeah, and you saw that.
Is it OCD or is it passion?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could argue that, but it felt like nothing else mattered to him. It like very singularly, like the girlfriends, all of it was secondary to this goal. And that, I think we've all met somebody who is passionate or OCD or whatever you want to refer to that as, who just like can't see, they have blinders on towards the goal. And that felt very relatable to me. I was like, oh, I know people who are like this.
Right. You know, let's get into Sienna Miller's character. We have Helene. What did you think of her? Because Bradley Cooper and Sienna Miller just came back together again after following American Sniper, and now a completely different film. What do you think of her character?
I thought that was so funny because when I was looking up stuff on YouTube, I saw their interview and I'm like, American Sniper, why is this? Wait, it says both of them. They're in this too, and I totally forgot that she played his wife.
Disappears into her roles sometimes. I was like, Sienna Miller. I don't know why it took me so long to figure out this was you.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they have to, I don't want to say this in a mean way, but like ugly her up to play such a real character, you know? Like they tattooed her up. She had a high tail ponytail.
Yeah, well, Bradley Cooper said that he like asked her on the set of American Sniper if she would like be interested in doing this film. He was going on to do it. And brought her in, and he said that she was like a different person. Day one, he walked in and she had all the tattoos and like the different haircut and everything, and he was just like, it was crazy to go from what they did on American Sniper to that. And I was like, that's fascinating to even be with somebody who you just worked on a project with, and it's like a different person.
Yeah, and also Bradley Cooper he had to gain all that weight for American Sniper.
Yeah,
he went from
there.
250 to back to a regular 150, you know?
He said if you actually were to go and rewatch the film, I was reading this morning, you can see his weight fluctuate because he was losing all that weight to go on and do a Broadway performance after The Elephant Man. So it definitely, he's like, my cheeks look different in certain scenes. I was like, well, that's a fun thing to go back and
everyone, just go through and just track.
Track the cheeks.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
Sarah, how about you?
I really, really liked Sienna Miller's character, the portrayal of the chef she had, the control sheet they gave her in the kitchen. Not only the artistic potential, but the fact that they tried to show that she could snap just as easily, and that she also kind of swayed that line of going to the family meals and her daughter. I liked her character. I think that I don't know if I really was for their relationship. That was something that kind of lost me a little bit.
Predictable?
Very predictable. And it just wasn't something where if they made a sequel to this and they weren't together, I'd be like, oh, I'm so sad. Like, it just didn't affect me that much. My favorite was when he asked her for a nice dress and she shows up in like a gown with like $700 shoes.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh. Being a chef does pay well.
Yeah, she looked super nice. I was like, is that a rental? You know? But
It could be.
She looked amazing. She looked gorgeous in that scene. I thought that scene was really interesting because Adam, his character takes off, right? And then he goes after Anne-Marie. He leaves, and it's kind of like she doesn't care, right? Like, I don't know why. What was Helene thinking in that scene? You know, like it's like she forgave him too easily later on. So I thought that was kind of funky for me when we get to the fish market and then we have the whole monologue.
I like the fact that Helene's character was also a mother. We saw a nurturing side, this softer side of what Adam could have been. And I liked how she brought that to his character and just like, you love to cook, we get that, and you're great at it, but you also have to do it for other people, and you have to be aware of other people's feelings. Well, and I liked how she always played it up to that.
The first time we ever saw him kind of, I guess, break in that way and be aware of someone else's feelings was when he made the cake for her daughter. And I kind of wanted, and I feel like it could easily go cheesy, I'm aware of that, but I felt like we just got this taste of him breaking down, and I wanted like a scene where he was actually talking more to the daughter than like each taking a bite of cake. It felt like I was like, oh, I know what they're trying to do, but I wanted it a step further.
Or even later in the film, like she could have come back.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that as well.
At some point, you could have gotten that scene, and we could have killed two birds with one stone.
Right, exactly. So true.
Yes, that cake looked gorgeous, though. I would have ate that whole birthday cake.
I was just thinking that it looked so delicious. Like, the icing looked like it wasn't super hard. It was just it was kind of like cutting through butter to get to the cake part, the fluff. Oh, so good.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, that's why they're Michelin
Now,
star
do you
rated.
think that the daughter tasted it and she was just like, oh, I don't like it? Or was her face was kind of telling me, like, oh, I do like this, it's so good, but I'm not going to tell him?
Kids tell the truth. Because we also saw that earlier scene with her mother when her mom was cooking for her and she was being selective about the food and she was commenting on it. And so to have her against Adam, someone who's like even higher rated against her own mother. I think that was just her being really genuine, being a kid like, I've had better.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. I could see definitely her being genuine, or that she knew how badly Adam had treated her mom, and it was like some reaction to that. And that would obviously be more of an adult reaction. Like, I feel like at that age, you're probably absolutely correct that she was being honest. But in my heart, I was like, maybe this is a reaction
And it's
to
not,
her.
yeah, and it's not just from the girls' reaction. It was also from the staff's reaction, because the staff wouldn't even talk to Adam because he wouldn't make something as simple as a birthday cake. So again, it goes back to, man, you just have to be human and feel for someone else.
Yeah, and Helene's character really carried that. She represented family and trust, and she kept poking at Adam over and over again with that. And eventually it got to the point where he felt like, oh, wow, I have to do that. I am a family with all these people in the kitchen with me. I'm not this like captain of a ship separating myself in my ready room or whatever.
Yeah. And Sienna Miller said her most challenging scene was the physically violent scene when Adam grabs her.
Yeah, that was intense.
Yeah, it was insane. Did you think it would get to that point in... Sarah, you're nodding your head yes.
Yes. I was expecting even more of it. I think that I know we wanted to see someone get beat or like thrown a plate at, but I'm not surprised at all it happened. And if you're dealing with someone who you're being told has snapped time and time again, in a world where they've established that one of the other chefs cut someone's nose off, I think that you do have to push that boundary of kind of the anger or violence or whatnot, and also show the problem if it goes too far, what happens. But I think that they established that was the world of this, and it felt believable, and I thought that it was for him to go after someone physically in the kitchen, and on top of it to be her character, which did represent like family and was going to be the most understanding of the group. I thought it said a lot, so it makes sense why it was challenging, but I think it paid off.
That scene was it made me feel like a kitchen was very militaristic and almost like a boot camp or a police academy. So to do that kind of stuff was just really jaw-dropping for me, especially when he grabbed her. I felt it like, what is he doing? I felt like he was gonna smack her next, but yeah.
I believe there was a piece on Eater about this movie talking about, does it perpetuate the idea of kitchen abuse? Like, is this what's actually happening in kitchens, or is it something that they're kind of escalating out? And I thought that was a really interesting point. I don't have an answer to it because I've never worked in a kitchen, but
You don't want to.
Also a kitchen of this caliber.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, Stephanie, because Marcus Wearing, the chef consultant whose restaurant they were using in the film, he said in an interview that he looked at what was going on in the kitchen and the chefs and the characters, and he was like, I see myself in them. I see myself like darker parts of me that I did in my past, and now thankfully I'm not like that anymore. So I thought that was really fascinating that even a chef, like a 2-star chef, he is seeing that this is an accurate portrayal of what happens in the kitchen.
Right.
On a lighter note, talking about what happens in the kitchen, did you guys find it interesting at all that they touched everything with their fingers?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like, though he always was picking up, when he did use silverware, he was picking up new spoons and stuff, which made me very happy as someone who enjoys food. Like, I was like, oh, you're not
Sanitary.
like double dipping your spoon. So thank you for that.
Yeah, he's not putting the saliva back in the same
I'm
thing.
hoping he used like different fingers. That's in theory what I'm hoping for, but I'm sure it looks like you don't agree.
I don't know. I'm reading what our engineer is typing, and it's most restaurants don't use glove, but they wash hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Which is true, but it was just very...
It's easier to wash your hands because then changing gloves every single time.
When people are so, particular about things
Thank
and
you.
health like that, it was just really funny to me to see like, nope, Look.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm fine with it, but I don't know about everyone else.
I trust that they do wash their hands, and what the chefs are supposed to be trained to do is not to touch anything else other than the food or the utensils. So they don't touch their eyes, their mouths, their hair, or whatever. They refrain from doing that, so that way it keeps these like pretty much like clean surfaces.
Yeah. And then also when they service the plates out, they're not even allowed to have fingerprints on the plate. So
That's
for the
right.
Michelin star rating,
He
of
was
course.
wiping it off each time.
Yeah. So I love the execution of that and how great that was. Let's talk about the secondary character, Daniel Brühl. I mean, he's a great actor. What did you think of his character? He played Tony, his restaurant friend who owned the restaurant pretty much
He was
now.
the maitre d'.
Yeah.
His father owned the hotel.
His father owned the hotel, and he
Yes.
was the one who managed the restaurant.
I liked his character. He was kind of OCD too, and I didn't catch that he was gay until they actually said it later on, right?
Yeah, like I didn't think he was gay either.
He was very subtle. That's a lot of the acting, other than Bradley Cooper's acting, was very subtle in this film. So he was uptight, subtle guy, right? And but I thought it was kind of like an easy in for Adam Jones to like get into this restaurant and start working there again. You know, he had that thread of a connection to him from working with him 3 years ago, but then it's like you just blackmailed him and he was like easily, boom, I'm in the restaurant now.
Yeah, that was easy. But on Tony himself, I really liked the character. I liked the subtlety. For me, I wonder how much of that was direction and how much of that was an actor's choice, because I think if you just look at the outline of the character, it's someone who it's very melodramatic, or it could be. It's a guy whose father is dying, who is trying to make his father proud, who is dealing with someone who he knows could explode at any moment. His restaurant's being destroyed, has like unreturned love. Like, it is something that could be, and who they are, and who's in the restaurant business, and like, that is a lot. That's a lot of stuff that I think this character, you know, an actor could really try and draw attention, and it was always very subtle, and I thought that played really well. And I wonder if that was direction or the actor's choice to just be like, no, this is his position in the restaurant business is to be the person at the front, the greeting person, the person who never gets affected by all the turmoil in the kitchen or all the turmoil in the chefs. Like, that is his job. His job is to be the face. And I thought that translated, or at least translated for me, into how he portrayed the character. Very hectic life, very hectic, all this stuff going on, but he was always just going to try and be subtle.
I agree. I really liked Tony as a character, and I also felt like he, in a lot of ways, was the counterpoint to Adam's character. He like internalized everything so much, and Adam was so big with everything that he did. The one thing that bothered me is kind of they had that kiss. Not that the kiss bothered me, just to be clear, but that was kind of their solution to like, oh yeah, okay, they kissed and now like let's go and do.
Now Tony's happy.
Yeah, now Tony's happy. Like, that felt very odd to me. If you'd been longing for someone for so long, I don't think a kiss would solve all your problems.
Yeah, I
See,
it might cause more.
It resolved that. Yeah, it resolved that current situation.
Yeah.
I feel like the kiss wasn't something to appease him. I feel like that was something that Adam just wanted to do because he just felt it in that moment. He felt so much joy that he realized that the Michelin men did not come on that night. So and then we had a scene, I think a couple scenes maybe before that, where Helene was talking to Tony out in the alley or in the kitchen. I think it was in the kitchen. And then he looks at her in a certain way, and because she was asking about Adam, if he was okay, and he realized that they got together. He realized that they at least had a kiss or something, that there was a connection between them two, and he was like, oh dear. And then he like gave her a kiss, and
it's like, I feel bad for you because you just fell in love with the person you don't fall in love with.
That too.
Yeah.
It was interesting though. I just felt like it was kind of this. I can totally see where you're coming from with saying that like there was so much joy in that room, but I think as Tony, you would be more upset afterwards. It wouldn't help you like be like, oh, it's all good, we're like friends and everything's great. It would upset you that he had done that and kind of used your feelings in some ways against you. And I don't know, maybe that was just something that bothered me.
Yeah, interesting. I like the fact that it was so subtle that we didn't need a lot more of that particular storyline. And fun fact, Daniel Brühl actually owns a Spanish restaurant.
Spanish tapas bar.
Yeah, Spanish tapas restaurant.
In one interview.
In Berlin.
They were doing a panel interview, the whole cast.
Yes.
And he was talking about how him working in this restaurant on set now, he realizes that his restaurant is nothing. It's crap compared to this restaurant. It's just like, he's not even like half a star. It's amazing. And
but it's the heart. It's a full heart.
It's the heart. And he also mentioned how he was playing this character too, and there was like a dynamic, a sharp contrast actually between the kitchen and the restaurant itself. So every time he had to come out, his character was like, he compared it to a swan, and he was always just doing like just walking around on like very delicate legs and just looking to see if everything's okay. And he knows that in the kitchen there is hell going on, and it's like a war back there, but then he has to present everything so delicately and nicely and just perfectly to each of the patrons in the restaurant.
Yeah. Let's quickly go over Emma Thompson. She was also in this film. I felt very underutilized, but she served a purpose in helping Adam really emote his internal struggles and his personal feelings. Like, he, in a way, just a therapist, really, for him.
In my initial notes on this film, that was exactly what I thought. Underutilized. She's great, and I get her purpose in it, but I wanted her... There had to be something more. It kind of goes back to my earlier point of amazing actors kind of without stories in this film. And it's all kind of serving Bradley Cooper or Adam Jones, and I just wanted more from her.
I thought that I felt personally, although I love her, being that they didn't utilize her, this was a character that if I eliminated from this script, it wouldn't have affected my opinion of the movie. I think that the most she did was at a couple points she gave some nice advice, and amongst all the characters I thought that it could have come from a lot of people. It could have come from Tony, it could have come from Sienna's character. Like, I didn't understand why this character in particular was given those lines. Like, for me, it was just something that didn't help. I didn't see a payoff in why she was she was making sure he was sober, because when he broke, she didn't discover it. Like, I didn't see why that kept going. There was no... If the whole point was she was supposed to keep track of his sobriety and it was supposed to lose funding if he wasn't sober, then why at the point that he got drunk, like, why didn't that affect funding? Why was it never mentioned? I just didn't understand why this character was really a part of it.
A couple of things to counter what you were saying a little bit. I feel like she was testing his blood for more like drugs.
Oh, really?
Not necessarily alcohol, because obviously alcohol is eliminated within an hour depending on how much you drink, right?
Because he did a lot of other hard drugs.
Yeah, in the past, right? Yeah. But we don't know if he did anything other than alcohol. And she did continue to test him after he had his breakdown, and they showed that montage, right, all the way leading up to when the other Michelin men came. And why would she be taking blood and just be like, okay, I took it once, like, you're gone, you're out of here, we're gonna cut off the funding? Because alcohol must have not been an issue.
Yeah, and I don't know.
And she did. I think the whole reason she was there, other than the whole funding thing, was because Tony recommended her, right? She was Tony's psychiatrist, I feel, and that's why she knew stuff about Tony. And I don't know why she revealed it. I thought that was kind of weird. It's like, why not just have Tony reveal it? That he was in love with him.
When she revealed it, he was like, I know.
He said, I know?
Pretty much.
Yeah, he didn't seem
Dr.
surprised
Patient
by
confidentiality.
Like, she was like, I'm pretty sure she was like, gosh, I'm going to have to see this movie again now just to figure out this point. I'm pretty sure it was like, he's in love with you.
Yeah.
And and there was some I took it as recognition of he already knew. So I was like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah, and I guess in hindsight, we could go back to that scene early in the film, or maybe it's like 30 minutes in, where we have Tony going into his room and like scoping the place out and turning things over, and then he grabs one of his shirts and he smells it. Right? Didn't he smell it?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And I thought like he was smelling it because he was disgusted with Adam, but he was really smelling it because he wanted his
I
aroma.
thought he was looking for the stench of alcohol.
Yeah.
I was like, is he trying to figure out if he's still drinking?
But clearly Adam knew that he was in love with him and was using it to get the restaurant and all of that. It all made sense once you found that out. You were like, oh, I can see how Adam
He
kind of
would
used
let Adam back into
right.
his life.
And oh, sorry, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, but it could have been done through another character if it was like, oh, well, the audience needs to hear this.
Yeah.
He could have told it to Sienna once he saw Sienna having feelings for him. He could have, or when the ex-girlfriend came into play, it could have, there was tons of places if the only reason was to share that information with the audience. There were other characters who would have also been easily to have opened up that can.
Yeah, the other thing that I have to mention with this film is I feel like I have been complaining about that we don't get enough of these side characters, and clearly they had an issue when it came to like editing the film down, because if you look at, I think, the early posters or early press for this movie, Jamie Dornan from 50 Shades of Grey was supposed to be in this movie, and they actually cut out his part, which is crazy to think. He's apparently relating to Sienna Miller's character, to Helene.
So I'm guessing her ex-husband?
Ex-husband.
Baby daddy.
Yeah, something, in that character. That's what they seem to be saying, but completely cut out, which is crazy to think. Like 50 Shades of Grey did huge in the box office. If you have all these people, you wouldn't necessarily think to cut him out.
Yeah, and it wasn't more so because even the director John Newell said he loved working with Jamie Dornan. It was more so for just the story development. It didn't fit with the film. They didn't see it was necessary for the pacing of the film. So it's nothing against it's nothing against Jamie Dornan as an actor. It was just for the storytelling purposes. They felt it was best to cut his story out.
I mean, it makes sense because this is such a Bradley Cooper or Adam Jones centric film. Like, that's how, when I was watching it, it feels like, I know there are scenes where he's not in it, but literally 95%, I would say, he's in this movie. Yeah,
He's in it. Let's go over to cinematography, because I thought this movie was shot beautifully. And I love the color choices, and definitely in all the food plates, and the editing was amazing. So we had the cinematographer Adriana Goldman, most known for August Osage County and Jane Eyre. That film, like, beautiful films. They really are. If you've seen both of them, gorgeous looking films. So what did you think of just visually how they executed the kitchen, the London landscape, and all that?
I thought it was beautiful, and I liked that it felt like I'm not sure actually where they filmed this. Did they film it in London?
Yes, most of it.
Okay. So it felt like London.
For a full month they were in London.
It felt like when he was walking the streets, you could tell it was London. It wasn't Toronto for London. Like, it really did, and I wasn't sure if that were actually filmed in London, but they did a phenomenal job of kind of capturing London. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, the plates were incredible. Like, it just made me so hungry.
Yeah, absolutely.
My favorite shots were up until, like, I can agree with half of the food made me really hungry. When they would show it originally, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Especially like their ingredient shots. Even when they were just illustrating plants as food, instead of registering as plants, they were registering to me as food.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful, and how they kept certain things very clean versus his kitchen, how they showed the difference subtly. I thought the atmosphere was carried off really well.
You guys have pretty much said everything I wanted to say. I just want to say, like, the food was beautiful. It felt like I was watching a documentary about food at some point, because it was just the way they were showing, like, the serenity and then, like, the colors popping off the plate at the same time. It was just, each plate looked so delicious. I was drinking green juice at the time when I was in the theater. I was like, I want one of those things right now.
I went to a restaurant after this movie. Not a good restaurant. It's like a normal restaurant, and I just was like, where could I be eating instead of this? And like looked up if there was like Michelin star restaurants in LA, and I was like, yeah, I can't afford those.
It's so funny that you say that. I ended up at Connie and Ted's, which is a seafood restaurant here in LA, and they have an open kitchen right after I saw this movie, and I was just like staring at the kitchen, and my friends were like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I was like, well, I'm so fascinated, and it was so calm and like not like that at all, but it really
and that's a
interesting.
good restaurant.
It is
like
a
it has nice reviews.
Yeah, it is. It's a great restaurant, by the way. But that being said, it was just their kitchen was so different. But you did see them like doing oysters and all that, so it was fun to go just randomly after seeing this film.
Right. And Marcus Waring, you know, the food consultant, his team actually helped prepare the menus and the actual recipes of all these dishes. And it was his sole job to make the atmosphere and environment exactly how it feels like in a real kitchen.
They really turned everything on.
And it felt like that.
Yeah, the heat was there. I think Sienna Miller actually got burned.
Burned a few times.
Yeah.
Like all of them. And there was no chef body doubles. That's all Bradley and Sienna doing. And that was Sienna doing all noodles and whatnot and cutting that. So I was like, props to you, girl. That's not easy. Like, I come from an Italian family where every year we're making noodles, and that is not easy. And she was just like, also on top of acting. Whoa. That girl's got it going on.
Funny little side note about her. In her interviews, everybody was asking her about what her favorite food was, and she was saying chicken adobo, which was super funny, and that's a Filipino dish. I never would have thought that she would have said something like that. And she said that's what she cooks for herself, and she prepares for herself at home sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And her character, Helene, was on one of the hardest stations at the restaurant when she was on the fish station.
That's right.
And so Sienna herself, at the end of the film, she's like, I cooked a lot of halibut, and I really know how to cook fish now. So good for her.
Apologize to the fish.
Apologize to the fish. It died in vain. I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy, that mentality, be like, this is for us, and we wasted it.
Yeah.
Feel bad, because you should. I really liked it. I love the editing and the sound effect, because it really, really... I know nothing about kitchen. I wouldn't be caught dead in a kitchen. Seriously, I'd rather pay the $10 meal to eat that day. But I completely have full appreciation for anyone who can do that and are passionate about it and who can execute it as brilliantly as they did in this film. So I applaud all the chefs and cooks out there who really put in their time and effort to creating all these amazing dishes and feeding the world. So good on you.
I kind of felt like the montage, like really early in the film, like within the first 10 minutes of him like preparing the restaurant was kind of odd. But then after a while, I was like, okay, wait, this kind of fits because we can't see him prepping the whole restaurant. It would take, it was well done. And then later on, they had to do another montage. But I thought that was kind of interesting. Like in a movie, like I don't really feel like there's two montages in most movies. It's usually like 3/4 of the way towards the end of the film when it happens. So I thought that was kind of fascinating too.
It was a good transitional point, especially for the second montage, because it showed from him recovering after his false Michelin rating review, and then him moving on, be like, I'm still going to do the exact same things and still moving forward and still doing my job, and then getting to that next point where he's like, you know what, I'm still going to do everything that I know. I loved it because the editing and the sound was so awesome together, and there was that subtle ticking clock, like everything's on a timer, especially when you're cooking food. There is that time crunch that all cooks have to live up to.
Yeah, we heard Adam yelling a lot, like 30 seconds for this, 2 minutes for that, come on.
Yeah,
yes, chef.
And in interviews, they talked about that in those types of restaurants, that high-level restaurant, you can't have something on the pass, like waiting for a waiter for more than 2 minutes. And so lots of food gets tossed out because, like, if somebody in the party's in the restroom or what have you, they can't bring the food to the table. So things continually get tossed. And
I'll just sit there and just eat
Yeah.
all the ones you're about to toss.
Right.
Like, I'll just sit there. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I won't move.
Yeah. And I thought that was such a fascinating fact that I had actually never heard before I was doing the research for this.
Yeah, and I believe Sienna Miller kept saying this is a story that she learned while being on this film, that for Michelin star rated restaurants, if someone in your party of 5, whatever, at your table, if someone goes up and leaves to go to the bathroom, and if they're gone for more than 2 minutes, they have to throw all the plates out.
Yeah.
Because the
Yikes.
taste is no longer there. It has to be served at a certain exact time.
Which leaves me with another question that I had, and I could not find any information on this. What happened to all this food at the end of the day of filming? Like, they had to make plate after plate of food, and I was like, does this go to the crew? Did they donate it somewhere? And I'm so curious, and I looked everywhere for that, and I could not find it. I'll have to keep doing research.
Just keep looking, or if someone out there knows,
Yeah.
let
please.
us know.
I imagine it went to Crafty.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah, right?
Which might,
Feed those PAs, they need the food.
Yeah.
I really, really did enjoy that. So, let's get into box office and the reception. As we know, it hasn't grossed enough money yet as of November 6, 2015. Quickly putting that timestamp on this.
Yeah.
Domestically, it only opened up to 6,700,000. Sarah, you do the box office, so you're
Yeah,
more
I
inclined to
mean,
numbers.
the box office, like, Halloween weekend was pretty horrible. Most anything open to is about 11 million. But this is really low. On top of, like, Burnt was getting a lot of horrible press. On top of Our Brand is Crisis, Sandra Bullock's film. Both of them, there's a lot of articles that were really poignant about, like, what did Sandra Bullock or
Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper. I was just going to call him Adam Jones, and I was like, that's not his name.
What were they thinking?
I was like, what did they do wrong? Like, and it was like, they were really pointing at, they're like, both people really involved with making these films and, like, getting them done. And it was a lot of negative attention. And I don't think that it's fair. I think that this movie it is not, in my opinion, one of Bradley Cooper's best films, but I don't think that the heart of the problem with this movie is on him. I also think that if you're looking at the demographic that this is reaching out to, Bradley Cooper has a pattern of, for the most part, being a multiple quadrant movie. You look at American Sniper, that did amazing numbers. It expanded from just its target audience to also the older audience to the teenage audience. It really was hitting families, couples, whatnot. This one really took out his male-dominated audience and focused more towards females. Also, if you look at what this movie, the genre, the plot typically does, it is an older female audience. So in my opinion, it wasn't aimed at everyone that everyone associates with Bradley Cooper.
I agree. And I mean, he is a producer on the film, so you could argue that, like, a lot of the things that are wrong you could pinpoint back at him, but I don't actually think that's fair. Like, there were issues with the story that may have existed before he came on as a producer. And it's one of those things where, yeah, I saw the same articles as you, as like Sandra Bullock and him, and he's had so many successes. I think every movie star, you can say there are some movies that don't work, and it's kind of sometimes out of the control of the star.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's hard is to have both Bradley and Sienna follow American Sniper. After that movie got such rave reviews, and that was Academy Award nominated for acting and storytelling, and just it was geared towards the Academy Award audience. And I feel for this is a simple movie. It really is. And now we're gearing into the Academy Award seasons. This isn't going to get nominated for writing or acting. And I think it's just hard to follow such a good movie such as American Sniper with a simple film like this. Even though this film was good on certain levels, but it doesn't have that caliber as American Sniper did.
I think also that character from American Sniper is such a stretch, and Bradley Cooper does these characters that are so outside of who he is, and this felt like, as we kind of mentioned, had more parallels to his real life, and sometimes that's harder to, like, I don't know.
Put on screen.
Yeah, exactly. People are like, oh, it's just Bradley Cooper, and I thought he did a great job of kind of going beyond that, but still, when you see a trailer, you're kind of like, oh, maybe it's just Bradley Cooper. Like,
Yeah. Sean, any thoughts?
I wanted to say that it was really cool to see, like, the beauty of, like, art, food, right, on the plate. But I thought it was, like, and we had some good themes going on, like the imperfection of human relationships, how you have to, like, kind of trust people. And even if you trust someone, they can still ruin that trust, and they can still betray you, just like Michelle did, right? And then we see him go on the bender and all that stuff. But then he's got to be pulled back in. So I like those things about the film. But I feel like it was there's an irony in the film itself as a product, because though the food was so beautiful, like the plot and the acting, to me, they were a little bit bland. And that made me want to, like, I don't agree with Rotten Tomatoes rating. I want to give it like a 60%.
Yeah, and Rotten Tomatoes, they're giving it 27%. Which seems very low.
That's too low.
Yeah.
Very low for this film.
That's a big time rotten splat right
That's
there.
like you want to get up halfway through.
Yeah.
If that number is accurate.
Yeah, you don't want to stay around for the dessert.
Well, I saw that, and then I saw like some 1-star things, and I've seen movies that are far worse than this movie, and like I sat through it, I enjoyed it. Yes, like we've mentioned lots of the flaws, but I feel like 27% is like, I'm giving up on this exactly halfway through, where this I was like, this is enjoyable, this is fun. And yeah, exactly, like 60-70% is where I would kind of land it.
If you look at the numbers, we got IMDb 6.8, that fits more with us. Same thing with maybe Cinema Score, like a B-. Okay, that's a little bit more reasonable.
Still solid.
And then the Rotten Tomatoes audience said 60%, so I think we're all hovering around that, Rotten Tomatoes critics, they got it wrong, man. That's way too low.
Yeah.
Come on.
And actually, this movie, the Weinstein Company, was supposed to release this in a limited release, but they scrapped that idea and decided to go worldwide. Do you think that worked against them? Should they have started limited release?
I think based on the time of year, it probably wouldn't have made too much of a difference. I mean, if you look at Steve Jobs, which came out and people are raving about, like that film is like a work of art, and that started as a limited release and had amazing limited release numbers, and then completely fell off. And that was based on the fact that for limited release there was like a charge of people who wanted to see it, and then it had great word of mouth, and then it still didn't make that much money. This, I don't feel like from the get-go really had people talking, so I don't really know what that would have done.
There's something to say about, if I look at films as a success in 3 ways, and then they can only fail in one. They can succeed if they make money and they get really good reviews. They can succeed if they get either one of those things, like money or reviews. But then the last thing is they fail if they don't do well with their gross, and then they don't do well in ratings. And that's what happened with Burnt. Burnt ended up getting the short straw.
Yeah. How do you, rate this among other food-related films? Do you put it on the higher part of your list or more so in the middle?
I think that in general, for me, the food film is not my favorite genre. I look at them kind of as they're really good, often background films. Like if you're doing something, they're a good background film. In that case, the most thing that I want from a food film is it to like make me hungry or subtly have some good jokes that I just pop in here. And for me, this was a fine movie, but it's not going to be something I really am typically going to choose above other cooking movies.
I would agree with that. I enjoyed it. I might put it on again. Like, I could see you rewatching it, but I don't think it's going to be like, oh, you know what? I really want like a fun, enjoyable, because there's so much drama in it. It's not like it's enjoyable, but it's not fun. I guess.
It's also not
But
super
it's
feel
not
good.
fun like Ratatouille.
And people, there's like a thing about cooking movies that I like them to sometimes be feel good movies.
Yeah.
And this one, for the most part, is not a feel-good movie. Yeah. That's what the appeal of Chef was, the family, or like the joining of cultures in 100-Foot Journey, the two movies that Marisa mentioned. In Ratatouille, it's like the fun-loving,
And Ratatouille is like I didn't realize this, the highest grossing food movie ever, which, like, you can't compare Burnt to Ratatouille. Like, that's a whole
Do you remember
other...
Mouse Hunt? Wasn't it Mouse Hunt? Where like the mouse like helps make balls of cheese or string cheese or something. I don't know. Something about feel good and cooking works well.
Exactly. You just want to be uplifted, I think, at the end. That was... Yeah.
Food movies for me, they're not my first choice when I go to a film. I don't know. There's just something about it. Like I feel like tonight, us talking here about Burnt, it makes me want to go watch Chef, and I know it's on Netflix.
Go watch it.
So that I can
It'll
see.
make you hungry.
Yeah, great. And,
So did this movie.
And I think that's probably what made it more of a success, because it jumped on that bandwagon of that's trending right now, obviously, for the past 5-10 years, food trucks, right? Mm-hmm. So doing that's probably what drew people in a lot more, as opposed to this. Like, we see Anthony Bourdain, we see Gordon Ramsay. They've been on television for like almost 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. With these high class like Michelin star kitchens, right? So maybe that's what the lack of draw was for the audience to get in,
because they can get the real thing very easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's just I feel like it's just I would rather see a documentary like Hero Dreams of Sushi if it was put in front of me with Burnt.
Well,
sorry. Sorry. You mentioning Anthony Bourdain and Gordon Ramsay. That's actually where the inspiration came from. This film, it was inspired by Marco Pierre White, who's also another well-known French chef. He's the one that trained Gordon Ramsay. And Stephen Knight was so he loved the idea of this new generation of French chefs coming about and being as successful and whatnot, and he wanted a story about that. So it is all related. I'd like to see a documentary on how that all started.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, didn't somebody write something about there was like Stephen Knight had a conversation with Keanu Reeves?
Keanu Reeves.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
They were talking about that, and it turned into a movie.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was talking to Keanu Reeves in the bar.
If it was supposed to be a vehicle for Keanu Reeves. It would be interesting, and then it suddenly switched to Bradley Cooper.
Mm-hmm. They wanted to do a story about American chef in London. So that's pretty much the inception of this film. But overall, this was a fun film to watch. Definitely, I would watch this again. I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Would you watch this again?
I would. I don't know that I would watch it. Like, there are certain films that I watch like time and time again, and I don't know that it falls into that category for me, but I would certainly watch it again.
The way I'm going to phrase this is, if I went to a friend's house and they were like, hey, I want to watch Burnt, I loved it, I'd be like, okay, I'll watch it with you. I'm not going to protest. Yeah. But I'm probably not going to sit at my house and then like have someone come over and be like, I want to watch Burnt. Watch it with me.
Yeah. Okay.
If Burnt's on Netflix, and I know my wife hasn't seen it yet, so if Burnt's on Netflix and we're sitting there and I would go, oh, hey, Burnt's on. You know that movie I watched a while back? You want to watch it? Let's have a drink while we're watching it. Then maybe I'll do that.
And you should make it a double feature and then also watch Chef.
Yes.
Or maybe a triple feature and watch The 100-Foot Journey too.
You can compare them all.
Yeah. And then make sure you have food throughout all that.
That would be the most important thing.
Excellent. All right, last final thoughts about this film, Stephanie.
Pretty much feel like I've summed it up, but I would say that I just really enjoyed it, and I thought Bradley Cooper, still to me, really does a great job. He owns the screen, and I think it's really hard to be in a film where you're in almost every scene and not kind of get like, ooh, it would be nice if somebody else was around. And yes, I said that I wanted other stories, but he really did a nice job carrying this movie.
Yeah. I thought for what they were given, the cast did a really nice job with their roles, their parts. I think that the idea I will put out there for future food movies is a good thing to do is have your chef have a signature dish. One of the main components missing for me for Bradley Cooper was a signature dish that was dissected and that the audience was able to love and understand. I think that you can actually solve a lot of story problems with something like that.
That's right. That's an interesting point.
Put a stamp on the film.
If they had something that was a signature dish, it would have made me care more about the food, because it was kind of like a factory churning out random beautiful dishes, but we had no connection to each thing. Even when he was talking to Adam was talking to Helene, and he was like, "Oh, I used some of your beef broth or whatever it was, that special thing," that he was like, "Oh, you know," he had like that mouth orgasm. It was like, okay, could you tell us more about that thing, right? So they left a lot of unexplored things in this film, underutilized characters, and that's why I'm giving this film like that 60% rating.
Okay, yeah, I think visually the technical aspects of the film was beautifully and visually sound. I thought that was great execution in that way. The storytelling and the character development wasn't fully there for me to appreciate and really, really get emotional with any of these characters. Although there were some moments we felt, but it wasn't like, oh my god, that's the worst. Overall, it was a fun film. I would still put this below 100 Foot Journey and Chef, because those films are brilliant as well. But it's a nice tie to those films. Overall, great. This was a great discussion. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to all of us. Where can everyone keep following you?
You guys can find me at Sean Austin O on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out my book, City of Angels and Discontent. I just released it today on the iTunes iBook store.
Congratulations.
Thank you guys. So be sure to check it out and download a sample. At least give me a rating and review and let me know what you think.
5 stars.
5 stars.
Or
5 stars.
in this
Five
case, 3
Michelin
Michelin.
stars.
or 4 stars if you don't really like it that much.
You can find me at Sara_Stretton. You can also find me on Popcorn Talk Network at Box Office Breakdown. That's on Sunday nights, and I'll be back at AfterBuzz soon, but we'll see.
There you go.
All right, and you can find me at Stephanie Wenger on all social media, and you can find me on AfterBuzz doing Scream Queens and Supergirl.
There you go. And you can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV. You can follow all of us on Popcorn Talk Network on Twitter, YouTube, all that fun stuff. Leave us a fun ratings, iTunes reviews and stuff. We love talking about films. We have a lot of films coming up. It's the Academy Award season. A lot of fun things to listen to. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will dissect you later. I don't remember.
Phil Svitek and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff. We would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.